Hello and welcome to the October subscription tasting video. I'm all by myself today, but today I am going to taste the 3 coffees that we're sending out to all the coffee subscribers around the world. We do send every first Wednesday of the month. And if you don't know what a coffee subscription is, you can go to our website. There's a link below and click on the various subscriptions. We have a couple of different ones. This particular one is the one where I choose the coffees. And that means I select 3 different coffees that I send out to the subscribers every first Wednesday of the month. Now you can subscribe to just 1 bag, and that means you will only get 1 of these bags. And you can subscribe up to 6 bags. That means you get 2 of each of these bags of coffee that I'm sending out. Cool, let's jump right into it because we have some very, very exciting coffees to taste today, and I'm sure that maybe 50% of you will absolutely love these coffees, and maybe 50% of you might not like them as much. But I can assure you that a natural processed coffee, which we're going to taste today, can be really, really delicious and quite clean if it's processed really well. So you might have heard of different types of processing when it comes to coffee. We have the washed process, we have the honey process, we have the natural process, we have anaerobic process. All of these kind of terms are a little vague for some people, but basically a natural means that you're picking a coffee cherry and just drying the whole cherry. And this can be done in many different ways. You can dry it in very thick layers on a drying table, for instance, like a drying bed. And that means you will ferment the cherries quite a lot, and you get quite a lot of these kind of funky flavors because there's yeast and bacteria that are kind of digesting the sugars in the cherry, and that they produce different types of aroma molecules that will affect the flavor of the coffee. So for instance, if you have very thick layer, as I said, you might get quite overwhelming taste of rotten fruit. But if you do very, very thin layers, like it's done here, you get a lot more of these kind of very ripe strawberry flavors, some peach flavors, and so on. So let's get into it. The first coffee we're sending out is from probably one of the most beautiful farms that I've ever been to. It's the Tatmara Coffee Plantation. It's based in Bonga, in Kaffa, in Ethiopia. So it's kind of in the cradle of where coffee comes from, or at least Arabica coffee. And this farm is situated in a forest. Negusie, who is the farmer, he bought some land from in Ethiopia where he grew up. And this forest has a lot of wildlife. They have baboons, they even have lions, buffaloes. And it's basically a forest where he has trimmed a little bit in the forest floor and then planted some coffee. And remember, coffee is native to Ethiopia, so this is a natural native plant. The only kind of farming he does is to cut the weeds manually. He doesn't fertilize, he doesn't spray or anything. And for the last 2 years, he actually had a lot of problems with his farm because there was a lot of rain during the harvest, so he wasn't able to dry the coffee cherries properly. And also he had a lot of troubles with coffee berry disease, which is a fungal attack on the coffee trees, and that really affects the quality of the coffee. I am very happy to say that this year, finally, the quality is back where it should be. Really, really good coffees, very, very clean coffees. He had very dry weather during the harvest, so he was able to process the coffee well. But when you dry the whole cherry, it's quite a lot of risk because there's more to dry than if you wash the coffee, for instance, where you just have the bean to dry. And that's why we actually gathered some money on our 15-year anniversary. And those money will be going towards building a wet mill at the Tatmara Coffee Plantation. So that means we might get some washed coffees from this farm in maybe 2 years from now. Let's taste the coffee. So if you're familiar with natural processed coffees, they are very, very fruity, very distinct. And this is no exception. This has a lot of kind of strawberry flavor up front, some tropical fruits, and definitely some kind of peach flavor as well. But it's also quite floral, like you might expect from Ethiopian coffees. It has these kind of slight jasmine-y floral notes. It's very juicy, like if anything can be juicy in coffee, this is juicy. It tastes like fruit juice. And in fact, we used this type of coffee once in a coffee competition where we just cooled down the coffee, we added a little bit of sugar, and we made espresso on the same coffee and added to it as well. We served it cold, and one of the comments from the judges was that there was not enough coffee flavor. Yet it was only coffee in the drink. So this is quite a fun coffee to drink. And for those of you who are kind of new to specialty coffee, you probably will be very excited when you drink this because it's so easy to pick out the flavors. So this particular coffee is the variety 74110. Quite a boring name for a coffee variety. It means it comes from the Jima Agricultural Center, and it's one of the varieties that they have been distributing. It's quite floral, always for me, and a little bit citric, but once it's processed as a natural, it's a little bit more kind of fruity, strawberry, and this kind of flavor. For me, it's not too much. I think if I'm going to drink a natural, it's going to be a natural that is a little bit more kind of subtle in the fermented fruit flavor, because the strawberry flavor you get here is definitely from fermentation. It's not from the coffee variety itself. So that's the first coffee we're sending out, the Tatmara Natural 74110. And then to contrast that, if you're subscribing to 2 bags or more, we are going to send out a coffee that for me now is like drinking sugar syrup. It's been so sweet lately, so I just had to send it out to our subscribers again. And you probably got this before if you've been subscribing for a while. But this is the kind of a new lot that or last lot from this farm, from the last year's picking. And it's Finca Tamana in Colombia, a farm that you should be familiar with if you're following us. And it's the Variedad Colombia, so that means the Colombian variety. And it's actually the screen 15 and 16. That means the beans are a little bit smaller than the lot we sent out previously. We do separate the screen size from this farm because it's much easier to roast the coffee when you have the same size beans rather than if you have small and big size beans together. They become a little bit more difficult to roast evenly, and that's when you get a little bit more of these kind of herbal flavors and green flavors. So when you separate the screens, it's much easier to develop the coffees fully in the roaster, and you get a lot more sweetness. So this is the smaller screens. It doesn't mean that it's worse in quality, it just needs a little bit different roast profile. Especially coming from the Tatmara, you will definitely taste a herbal note, and that's because it's a Variedad Colombia. This is a hybrid cultivar, a mix between Híbrido de Timor and Caturra, and developed in Colombia. And most of these hybrids will have a little bit of these herbal flavors from the Híbrido de Timor cultivar. But it's really, really sweet, and that's why I'm drinking it from this cup, because it also enhances the sweetness. Yeah, sugar syrup, or how to say, panela in Colombian. It's actually caramelized raw sugarcane juice. They make these kind of big blocks of it and use that to sweeten water or milk or something. It tastes a lot like that. It has a little bit of this kind of mild citric acidity, but and subtle fruit flavor, very, very subtle. But for me, this is more like a caramel, sugar, syrupy coffee. Super sweet, washed process, so very clean, compared to the natural, where you have a lot more of this kind of fermented fruit flavor. But side by side, it's so much fun to taste these coffees because they become so distinct when you have these kind of extreme contrasts. So that means the second coffee is from Finca Tamana in Colombia. And the third coffee is also from Tatmara Coffee Plantation. It's also a natural processed coffee, but it's a different cultivar. And this is the cultivar 74112. And so they're released from the same place, the same year, but slightly different trees. And they do taste slightly different, I have to say. Whether it's actually the process or not, I'm not 100% sure, because it's quite difficult to control the natural process. But it does taste a little bit different, maybe a little bit more winey. Let's see. Yeah, for me it's a little bit more like, if you think candy, this would be more like a red candy. This would be more like a purple candy. So a little bit more winey, kind of these grape flavors. very ripe mango maybe, ripe strawberries. Maybe a little bit less floral than the 74110. But definitely very juicy and winey. Kind of a little bit more deep in flavor, if you know what I mean. More kind of more ripeness and more developed fruits, I have to say. So this is also from Tatmara Coffee Plantation, processed in the same way. Negocia has drying beds where he dries in very, very thin layers. And he keeps the cultivars separate because we want to buy them separately, because they do taste slightly different. And also he has different lots, of course, so we have to go through different lots to taste and select the best ones. So I feel like the quality this year from Tatmara has been really, really, really good. And these coffees are really pleasant to drink for me. Very juicy, very sweet, very fruity, and they don't have this kind of Quakery finish. Quakery means, Quaker is the light beans you very often find in coffees, and they can taste like peanuts. And very often I find this in natural processed coffees, and that's not a very pleasant flavor when you have fruit up front and then peanuts in the aftertaste. So these ones for me are much more clean and have this kind of, I wouldn't say clean like a washed coffee, but clean ferment flavor. So the fermentation feels controlled and more subtle than if it's just laying there in thick layers and rotting, and it becomes this kind of very funky flavors. This for me is not like overly funky at all, actually. So those are the 3 coffees we're sending out. And if you want to learn a little bit more about why we don't buy a whole lot of natural and anaerobic coffees, you should listen to our podcast, the episode named Funky Coffee, where I have a conversation with Jamie from Nordic Approach. We're discussing, various flavors in coffee and where they come from and whether they're good or not, and so on. So I know a lot of you enjoyed that episode, so if you haven't listened to it, you should definitely check it out. Cool, I think that's it for this month. 2 beautiful natural processed coffees from the Tatmara Coffee Plantation, 1 beautiful sweet washed coffee from Finca Tamana in Colombia. I hope you enjoy the coffees and hope to see you soon.